That quotation from Munich before our break, you are all God if only you could see it. And spiritual dharma is simply a positive way of passing the time between birth and death. He wrote that in a letter. And he added, this is very interesting because we're talking about projection. And of course projection can be a burden for the one upon whom it is placed. And he ended that letter, please release me from your love. Oh, it's an amazing phrase. And you think how extreme these projections can be, particularly on a figure like that, and how burdensome they must be. I mean, he will literally, or almost, maybe I'm exaggerating slightly, maybe I'm not, but he will have people coming to him, perhaps even daily, and saying things like, Guruji, I need to go to Bombay to buy a toothbrush. Is this a propitious day to go? And you'll have to say yes or no, the signs aren't right, no, go tomorrow.
But it seems that here in the West, this has been now done. It's not so strong anymore.
No,
it's kind of fading out. This
thing.
And
I think in the day, I think maybe that's to do with the internet, that it's so easy now to find out about so many people. Whereas in the past you probably only hear about very few.
There was an interesting documentary film some years ago. An actor pretended to be a guru.
Kumare.
I think so. Yeah,
It's
very
wonderful.
Yeah,
that's great.
Thank you for reminding us of it. Yeah, talking about, because that whole documentary is about spiritual projection. It's
How is it called?
It's called Kumare. Kumare, and you can buy it very cheaply off iPlayer or Amazon or something. You can download it, and everyone should watch it. It's
really
beautiful. It's lovely. Yeah. It's a real exercise. The whole thing, really, in a way, is about that spiritual projection. Yeah, and what happens when it's suddenly broken.
People get angry, I suppose.
Some people get very angry, other people don't. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, but
others were very thankful.
Yeah, the others felt that they had, well, maybe it gets a bit tricky there, because you see others felt that they had been taught a great lesson. And it was a blessing, so maybe that projection hadn't been broken.
You're right.
But maybe some gurus, they also enjoy it when they enjoy the projection.
Yes.
Because they get a lot of energy. Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then maybe some get trapped by it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what that "Please release me from your love" was about from Munich. Who knows? But yeah. I mean, it has to be a dance between two parties, of course, because it is possible for the one who sits at the front to reject or stop or block as much of that projection as they can. They'll never be able to block it all, but it's possible. And you can see, it's very easy. If you see anybody sitting at the front of the room in a way, it's very easy to say who's playing up to that and who's trying not to play up to it, if you like. Who's trying to encourage it and who's trying not to encourage it. Again, not that it matters, not that one's any better than the other, of course not, And what I was saying much earlier, you may learn more from a charlatan than from a saint. I'm using those terms very loosely. I would say I have learned far more from charlatans than from saints in my lifetime. And the same thing, you see, you go and visit someone who's encouraging those projections like mad, and you might learn a lot more from that. As in, you might notice what it is you're doing in that way. And again, none of which matters. Well, except that on the psychological level it might make life more comfortable. When those projections have gone, it might make life more comfortable. It might occur to you that actually the universe doesn't really mind whether you go to Bombay to buy your toothbrush today or tomorrow. So it could be a relief to see through that.
Yes. I read a lot about Ramana, that his only fear was that the pupils who loved him too much.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, because he couldn't resist. There was a woman who was cooking for him, and he had to eat it because there was so much love and he could resist her love. And because if there's no self, there's no resistance of the love.
Well, I've never heard that, it's another good example of how spiritual projections can come back and bite you on the arse.
That say, release me of your love, that remember me on the story.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's meant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that is what Muktananda meant. I don't know. Please withdraw your projections. Please see me as what I actually am. Yeah. I'm just hypothesizing there. It's what I like to think he meant. Yeah. Yeah. Love can free us and it can entrap us, obviously.
How would you define unconditional love?
Yeah, okay. How long have we got? We haven't got time, we've only got 37 minutes left. What I always say, I don't know whether this will make sense or not, but I always say to those questions, it's an obvious question to ask. If people use that phrase, they deserve to be challenged about it. And what I always say is that the difficult word in that phrase is not the word love, it's the word unconditional. Because in some way or other, and it may be in very different ways for different people, I feel like, unless somebody's completely psychopathic, and if they're completely psychopathic, they're not likely to come to a meeting like this. Except for the psychopaths, everybody has some handle on what love means in different ways. It might be in very different ways for different people and so on, but I feel like everybody has a handle on what love means, and I feel so much has been said and written and spoken by people far more eloquent than me, poets and playwrights and songsters and so forth. What could I possibly add, to our understanding of what's meant by love? But the difficult word in that phrase, it's not difficult, it's actually impossible. It's impossible in the sense that the mind can understand what's being said, but it can't get what's being said as long as the mind's involved, is the word unconditional. Because the mind cannot, and by the mind I obviously mean the process that happens that creates the appearance of a mind. Take that as read, and I'll go on using the word the mind. The mind does not live in unconditionality. It absolutely lives in conditionality. You could almost say I'm not going to say it's the basic function of the mind, but it is one of the basic functions of the mind, or the psychic thought stream that we think of as the mind, to divide things up. That's how, if you like, that's how our sense of duality arises. We divide things up, first between me and everything else, and then, the glass is different to the table. That's duality. So the mind divides things up, and it divides things up according to all sorts of different structures. One of the most basic structures is what is positive and what's negative, what I like and what I don't like, what I approve of and what I don't approve of, what I love and what I hate. So the mind does not live in unconditionality, cannot live in unconditionality. When it tries to live in unconditionality, which it may well do if it becomes very holy and virtuous and very religious or spiritual or whatever it might be, whenever the mind tries to live in unconditionality, it inevitably ends up in a terrible state of conservation. And there is unfortunately really no laxative for the mind in that state of constipation known as moral virtue, you know, where everything's like, I don't mind, you know, give me tea, give me coffee, I don't mind, I'm above all that, you know. You know, the kind of, I mean, sort of religious, you know, but the sort of martyr mentality, I'm just here to serve everybody else's needs, you know. I have that wonderful phrase of C.S. Lewis comes to me, I often quote at this point. I'm not quite sure if it's relevant, so I'm going to throw it in anyway in case it's relevant. She devoted her life to looking after others. You could tell the others by the haunted looks on their faces. You know, that kind of, you know. So I have risen above this kind of like and dislike level. On a mental level, that's always, I want to say, contrary. We're either conning ourselves or we're conning other people. You see, so the mind lives in conditionality. So how can the mind understand unconditional love? You know, because unconditional love, the surprising thing about unconditional love actually is that it's unconditional, which means it embraces everything. You know, including that which the mind most hates, finds most disgusting, most rejects, most resents, makes the mind most angry. How can love embrace that? Well, of course, the love that the person knows, the love that the mind knows, can't do that. So basically the mind can only know conditional love.
Yeah.
And any pretense that the mind can get unconditional love is simply a pretense. So all we can say about unconditional love is when the mind collapses, that may be seen to be the case. That's what is meant by the fullness. You know, when the mind collapses, perhaps emptiness is seen, and only emptiness, perhaps, in which case unconditional love isn't seen, just emptiness is seen. If the mind collapses and emptiness and fullness is seen, that's what's meant by that. What is that fullness? That fullness is unconditional love. What is emptiness full of? It's full of unconditional love. What does unconditional love embrace? Well, surprise, surprise, everything. Including everything that I personally, from the level of my ego, my prejudices, my mind, my psychology, everything that I reject, everything that I hate, everything that I find disgusting, everything that I find loathsome. So that's the difficulty. And it was in German, I mean, there's an anecdote in probably at least one of my books, if not more, because I have a tendency to repeat myself, if you haven't noticed that. But it was in Germany that I was giving a talk, and there was a girl in the talk, and she didn't say anything at all during the talk, and at the end of it, I was still sitting there, and she came up to me and she sort of loomed over me. She wasn't that tall, but I was sitting, she was standing. She loomed over me in a way which I could not interpret really, but which kind of seemed like it could be threatening. You know, maybe this is what Gandhi felt just as he was about to be assassinated, I don't know. And she said to me very challengingly, you say that unconditional love embraces everything. Does that include dog shit?
Oh.
You know, and I looked at her and I said, well, of course it embraces dog shit. If it didn't embrace dog shit, it wouldn't be unconditional. And I thought, is she going to hit me? What's going to happen? Is she going to knife me? She broke out into this huge smile. I said, that's what I wanted to hear. And gave me a warm hug instead of assassinating me, which is why I'm sitting here before you today. One of the reasons. You see, so nothing can be excluded. If the mind gives itself permission, which it will do, just to exclude one thing. So, oh, right, unconditional love. Yeah, I get unconditional love, that's okay. Yeah, I can let everything except just this one. I'm just going to make this one exception. You know, the one exception is dog shit. Or the one exception is my boss Peter from 3 years ago who treated me so badly. I'm not letting him into unconditional love. But everything else, yeah. If there's one exception, it's not unconditional love. Because if I've excluded dog shit, then the love is conditional on it not being dog shit. If I've excluded my boss Peter, the love is conditional on it not being my boss Peter. So the mind can't do that. It can pretend to do it, and it can give itself a hernia or constipation doing that, but it can't actually do it. So unconditional love, all I can say about it, I think all anyone can say about it in a way, I'm sure other people can say it much more eloquently than me, is simply that unconditional love is simply what's seen to be the case when the self collapses. If the mind then comes back in, which it can do, and personalises that, it can then give itself years of torture. Because when the mind comes back in and says, okay, that's the case, that's something to do with me, but then the mind can't function like that, the mind simply can't function like that, then it can give itself years of masochistic torture. Every time a unloving thought comes into my mind, then I can beat myself up. Oh, now I'm supposed to be unconditionally loving, you know. Look at that bastard at the traffic light. Oh no, I just caught myself not being that. So it doesn't have anything to do with you, who you think you are, what you think you are. It has nothing to do with your mind, your psyche, your neuroticisms, if you have any. Nothing to do with any of that. It's simply what seems to be the case. It's baffling. It's the deepest mystery of all. The mind is quite entitled to look at the world and the state of the world, what happens in it, and the mind is quite entitled to look at all of that and say, what the hell are you talking about? How can you call this unconditional love? And there's no answer to that. Well, there may be lots of answers to that, but none of them really apply. All that can be said is, I'm sorry, that is the case. And I've said many times before, where you have an argument between non-duality and the mind would always win. And yet, it has no relevance. And the only other thing I can say about it is there is something about the seeing of unconditional love which often or usually brings that end to the seeking person. Seeing the emptiness of everything generally doesn't seem to bring an end to the seeking person. Seeing the fullness of everything, the love in everything, does. Sometimes, often, generally, usually, whatever word you want to use, bring an end to the seeking person. That's the full stop, that's the final full stop.
And some people just see the emptiness?
Yeah.
How is that?
Possible, I don't know, but it is. That's what, sometimes, in the story, and this is a story, but it happens often enough, apparently, in the drama to make it maybe worth talking about. What can happen is there can be a moment of seeing after which the person comes back. The person's gone, there's a moment of seeing and the person comes back. And in that moment of seeing, the emptiness of everything is seen, but the fullness isn't. Everything is revealed, almost like a hologram. Again, the Buddhists are very good at describing this. The Buddhists are very good at describing the emptiness of everything. But then what often happens, seems to happen, if you like, is that the person, the non-existent person, seems to come back, often in a state of shock, often very much changed by that, often in a state of tremendous confusion. If the person drops and what's seen is the emptiness and the fullness, all I can say about that is the person doesn't tend to come back after that, doesn't seem to tend to come back, however you want to put it. That is the end. Whatever happens after that happens. We can't make any prescriptions about that, but that tends to be the end of the person and therefore the end of seeking. No person, no seeking. It's a mystery. So there's emptiness and there's fullness and they're the same thing. Just as there's silence and there's noise and they're the same thing, and just as there's stillness and there's movement, and they're the same thing. So, for example, while the person is there may be a desire to seek out stillness in still places, like I don't know, a monastery or a mountaintop or a forest or something. It's lovely, you know, absolutely lovely. When the person's no longer there, anything's possible, but there'll probably be less of a tendency to seek out stillness in a special place when it's recognised there are no special places. Everywhere is equally still. You know, the centre of the busiest road junction in Munich is just as still and just as silent as, you know, an 800-year-old Buddhist monastery where there's been centuries of uninterrupted meditation. There's no difference in the stillness and the silence. Movement is stillness moving, and noise is silence making a noise.
There are still personal preferences?
Oh God, yes. I think that God, yes, which came out more emphatically than I expected, probably applies to this psychophysical structure sitting here. It may be perfectly possible that there are other psychophysical structures, to use a very romantic phrase, where there are no longer preferences, but they're probably rare. There are probably a good few psychophysical structures who pretend that there are no personal preferences left, because you get quite a lot of spiritual cachet from that. Give me a bucket of lager or give me a bucket of poison, I don't care. But yeah, usually there's preferences are preferences, they belong to the character. Nothing to do with what we're talking about here. You know, we're talking about the disappearance, the possibility of the disappearance of the apparent but unreal person. And preferences belong to the character. And the character may be very much changed by seeing this, or it may hardly be changed at all. But in either case, preferences are likely to continue, certainly to some extent. I mean, for example, you know, I express what a lot of other individuals that I talk to express as a kind of much more of a preference for a quiet life. Quiet and stress-free life. In a way, you could say, well, there's kind of fairly obvious psychological reasons for that. That, you know, the more neurotic we are, the more distractions we need. The more caught up we are in the drama of our own life, maybe the more distractions we need. And neurosis itself is very good for creating drama. You know, if I'm very neurotic, you know, my partner looks at me in a certain way. If I'm very neurotic, I might interpret that and over-interpret, then explode, then we have a row, and then we have to go to see somebody like our friend who's had to leave early now, a psychotherapist who deals with couples. Yeah, so neurosis itself is very, very good for creating a lot of drama. So if the self collapses, it's likely to reduce neurosis, there's likely to be a need for less drama. A liking for more quietude, to use a rather pompous word. But preferences, absolutely, why not?
And opinions too.
Yeah, why not? But on the circuit, there will be many people that tell you, no, absolutely not. In fact, I had somebody comes to see me from another country, foreign, both to Germany and to England. Somebody who's seen me a few times came to Toner's talk last time I was there, and then was talking to me in the tea break and was telling me about this teacher. Well, that's a bad start to start with, a teacher. This teacher in France, who I've never heard of, don't know the name of, but it's very well known in France. And he says, you know, if you have any political, I'm paraphrasing, but if you have any political opinions and that kind of thing, then no. No, then that's not it. There's a whole there's a whole stream of belief and thought and stories of that kind of. In a way, it's just a different version of the story of spiritual purity. But this has to do with some kind of purity of behaviour, purity of word, purity of thought, and so forth. So if there's a preference for one kind of politics rather than another kind of politics, then there's still a person in there with attachments and so forth. It's just garbage. What arises is what arises. A preference for toast arises. A preference for this kind of political party arises. An opinion about Angela Merkel arises. In a sense, if you deny that, you're back into duality. Because now we have oneness, the wonderful oneness, and then opinions about Angela Merkel that don't belong there. What arises is what arises.
But at the same time, it's seen that it's just arising.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the difference.
Yeah, and there can still be passion though, because there are different personalities. I mean, whether it's like whether the person's there or not, if you'll excuse that very clumsy phrase, there are different personalities. There are personalities that are very, very passionate about politics. There are personalities that don't give a damn about politics, etc., and so on. And so on. Yeah, that's just part of the drama. As long as there's a psycho-physical organism active, there's, that just goes on. Yeah. So, again, the most fundamental way of putting it is, again, is to go back to what there are no rules. There cannot be any rules. As soon as we go, as long as there are opinions, or even worse, strongly held opinions, God forbid, strongly, as long as there are strongly held opinions arising, then somehow this isn't it. That can only come from the mind. It's just a story that the mind tells. It makes itself feel better. How are strong opinions anything other than oneness expressing strong opinions?
Could you say that unconditional love is also the same as impersonal love?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's absolutely. Because again, it's pointing to the fact that the character can't get it.
Yeah.
The person or the character can't get it, and everything the character or the person does to strive to get it is likely to tie it up more and more and more in knots. Yeah.
Because this absolute has this sort of sense of really impersonal, with this nothing. I go back to this nothingness or this blackness or whatever, but there's something, it's not black, but somehow...
It's wonderful.
Yeah. Empty.
If it was black, it would be full of blackness and not empty. It is full, but as I said, it's not full of blackness, it's full of unconditional love. Which of course embraces blackness in every possible sense. Because otherwise it would not be unconditional.
Yeah.
It embraces hope and despair.
That's strange to see the blackness.
Yeah, impersonal love is a very good phrase, yeah.
And it even embraces the conditional love.
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. And conditional hate.
Yes.
Of course. Where can conditional love arise except in this? Yeah. I was talking about this once in a meeting. We were talking about unconditional love, and I was saying, that the mind, the person, separate yourself, whatever you want to say, can't get it. And somebody shouted out very challengingly, what about the love of a parent for its child? Isn't that unconditional? And before I could respond to it, somebody in the audience came up with a much better answer than I could have done. They just said, well, of course it's conditional. It's conditional on them being your child. Why do you feel unconditional love for your child? Because they're your child. It's totally conditional.
Interesting, because from my personal feeling, that comes closest to unconditional.
Yes, yeah, I think it's probably for many psychophysical systems, that's probably the closest it can get, but not for all, of course. I mean, it's not, for many psychophysical systems. It might be something like being in nature, being by the sea, being by a lake, being in the mountains, being in the forest. That might come closest. I mean, yeah, but even the closest doesn't even begin to touch it.
Because it's disappointing.
Because it's not, because you see that love for the child, which is, well, it comes closest, but it's intensely personal.
Yeah.
And it intensely depends on this mysterious, magical bond that the mind doesn't even understand. I mean, who knows what it's about? Something deeply, deeply, deeply evolutionary, maybe. We have to children can also be a bloody nuisance. We have to have something going to stop us eating them. which is quite obvious that a lot of other mammals don't do, A lot of mammals eat their own children, I presume because they're so annoying. It may just be because they're hungry, I don't know. So that love has to be very intense for our survival.
And it doesn't mean to have to love unconditionally somebody else. This is also a misunderstanding, isn't it?
I didn't get the beginning of that.
To understand it in that way that somebody has to love others unconditionally.
That is such torture, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh God! Well, because the way you express it is somebody has to, or they should, or because as soon as a sentence begins or has anywhere near it the word should or ought, you should, you ought, you have to, you just run away from that as fast as possible, because that is a fast track to neurosis and unhappiness. Yeah, but of course the world of morality and virtue and looking after people is full of that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, yes, you have to.
I used to have the idea that gurus or spiritual teachers love everybody unconditionally.
Yes, of course they
But
do.
that's also not true.
Of course, it's also not true. Yes. It probably is true in a parallel universe somewhere else. Some planet probably, but yeah, of course, that's part of the projection, and that's kind of not what everybody wants, but many of us who seek, and believe me, as I was saying yesterday, I've done my share of being with the Guru, and of course it's what so many of us who do, that's what we want. And in a funny way, I need to be very careful what I'm saying here, in a funny way, not in the way we're talking about here, but in a funny way we get that in the sense that often we may get from the Guru or some figure like that, love which is a damn sight less conditional than the love we've experienced before.
Yes.
So if we've experienced from our parents the love being very conditional indeed, you only get loved if you behave in exactly this way. You step outside that tiny box we've imprisoned you in, and we withdraw our love, which is the upbringing that some people experience. And then maybe you've got into other adult relationships where the love has not just been normally conditional, as it always is between humans, but very rigid, very constricted. And then you go to a saintly Guru figure. Then in a kind of paradoxical way, that can sort of psychologically and emotionally be very releasing, because for the first time in your life, you're still experiencing love, which of course is conditional, but it's so much less conditional than what you're brought up with. It can feel like a real freedom. Don't forget that if we get out of a small prison into a bigger prison, it can feel really like massive freedom.
It really felt like that, the person sitting there was really loving unconditionally.
Yeah, yeah. And it's kind of much more easy, it's much easier for the guru who doesn't have any kind of personal relationship with us, you know, they're not kind
It's
of...
easy for
Yeah, that's right.
It's kind of quite easy then to be reasonably, I'm going to pick my words very carefully, it's kind of easy then to be less conditional. For the guru, who is the guru who may be surrounded by, you know, a coterie, a very close coterie of devotees who look after his or her every need, very often psychopathic devotees who are very good at keeping other people away. So the guru is very, very, very protected from the irritations of normal social discourse. It can be very easy then to exude a kind of love, which of course, although it's not completely unconditional, is nevertheless a lot less conditional. It's probably its main condition as the guru sits there loving the devotees. The main condition is that the devotees don't get too close. Why is it that the psychopaths are the ones that always take over the ashram? It's because they're the ones that want to, obviously. Who's going to get in control? The control freaks, of course. Who's going to stop them? The guru's not going to stop them. He doesn't give an arm. He doesn't give a damn. He doesn't care. She doesn't care. Why did Osho's close coterie end up on trial for murder? No, not murder. Attempted murder. Why did Osho's close coterie end up on trial for trying to poison an entire township and shoot the local attorney or deputy attorney? Because they were psychopaths. Clearly they were psychopaths. But they were psychopaths with so much power they went completely out of control. Oh, by the way, if you don't know that story, it's delicious. You should read about it. It's lovely. Delicious story.
Give a little taste of your book that you have been working on over the last...
Oh, God, that's a bit mischievous of you.
Because you talked about it now several times, and
right.
there is a kind of a theme that goes through this talk a bit, like the gurus and the projections and all that.
Yeah, no, it's all in there. It's called Confessions of a Seeker, Adventures in Spirituality, Therapy and Belief. And I just sat in coffee bars for long, long times, and it just kind of flowed out fairly spontaneously. And then I sort of go back and reread it, and I think, my God, there is something in here to offend everybody. I think if or when this is published, this could be the end of my career, such as I call it, as a non-duality speaker. There's quite a lot on religion in it. I mean, it's all, apart from 2 or 3 short chapters, which are more kind of philosophical, like some, we were talking about free will and so there's a chapter about free will and choice, and there's a chapter about something else a bit philosophical, but apart from that, it's mostly drawn from personal adventures and experience, gurus, growth, transpersonal growth groups, past life therapy, quite a lot on religion. But I mean, from a personal, like groups I've been involved with, like Buddhist groups and Christian groups and that kind of thing, I've had some sort of involvement with. Quite a lot of personal stuff, actually, sort of a few personal revelations, the kind that you might find in the sort of disreputable English newspapers, a little bit of that, And there isn't really, well, it's obvious in a way the theme, that the theme is about seeking, all of it is about seeking in some way or other. And I think the only kind of, apart from that, the thread that runs through it is skepticism, I suppose. Skepticism about extraordinary claims about reality. Yeah.
Will it be published this year?
I doubt whether it'll ever be published in German.
But in English it will be published anyway.
I hope so.
Okay.
One day. Yeah. Is that enough about that? Yeah. I have visions that when it is published, shortly after that, I may wake up in the morning to hear a howling mob outside my house. And if I survive long enough to go out to investigate further, it'll turn out to be, it's not a howling mob, it's several different howling mobs. You know, there'll be a group of enraged Scientologists there with pitchforks. There'll be a group of enraged Catholics there with spears and burning torches, etc., etc., etc. So what a wonderful place to end a weekend on non-duality with 5 minutes of utterly personal reminiscences about the past, drawing on memory and expressing very strong opinions in some cases and so on. One of us ought to think of something enlivening to say of a non-dual nature to bring the afternoon and the weekend to an end. There's just this. There's just this in which anything may arise, including memories of an apparent past in which there was an adventure with a Bundscrew. There's just this. Where can those memories arise? Only in this. There may be an expectation of something happening for you tomorrow morning, some plan that's already underway, some appointment, some work you have to go to. Where can that expectation arise? Only in this. Not one apparent person in this room has ever experienced, nor will you ever experience, one split second of the past or the future. There is only this. What does this consist of? It simply consists of whatever is happening. If there is nothing happening, what does this consist of? Emptiness. This is emptiness and everything arising in it, and they are the same thing. And that's the end of the afternoon. But thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.